Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for coming today to remember Nancy Lodge. I'm John McCardle. I'm the Mayor of Independence, and it's my honor to be the officiant for today's gathering. In the next hour, when we're here together, I'll share a little bit of Nancy's history. We'll have several of Nancy's friends come to the podium to speak, and then there'll be an opportunity for any of you who'd like to say something to share a story. I'll pass the microphone around. At the conclusion of today's event, there'll be a time to share a few words with the family, and then the family will be retiring to a private internment ceremony. Sound okay with everybody? Great. Today is Nancy's birthday. The family's chosen this day to celebrate Nancy, to share a bit of history, to share stories, to remember the many good times, and possibly take away a bit of her spirit as we move forward in our respective lives. As we remember our friend Nancy, we think of the ways she touched all of us. Her positivity, her laugh, her happy eyes and smile, her genuine concern for others. Many of us who live in Independence and Monmouth, we only know a part of her life, and it'll be my honor to share some of the things that shaped her life here and ultimately made her not just a friend, but a confidant and a shining light of optimism. Nancy was a Southern California girl growing up with parents Stuart and Sarah Streshly in the 40s and 50s, and she was part of what John Kennedy called the New Frontier. She took that optimism of the early 60s and began a job with Travelers Insurance. Now, Mike and Nancy met in 1965. And began their adventures together as a married couple back in '66, and their adventures together began from that day. A long journey took place together as they traveled to Japan for Mike's Navy assignment in May of '69. Things were a little bit different from Southern California. When they got there, because of their size, they were required to live on the bottom floor of the apartment building. After Mike left the Navy in '70, they returned to San Diego, where Nancy began again working in the insurance industry. They adopted their son Billy in 1974 and daughter Sarah in 1977, and there are 5 grandchildren from those marriages. Nancy became an insurance broker and opened her own insurance agency in La Jolla around '79. She operated that agency until they departed San Diego in 1997. From a relatively consistent, regular life as a successful businesswoman, married to a police officer, in '97, Nancy and Mike set off for a major adventure, a true trek of discovery. Well, they traveled up to Salt Lake City, bought an RV, and went full-time on the road. Along the way, they became Nevada residents because it was a low-tax state. And with their newly purchased 30-foot motorhome, a flip cell phone, a GPS system connected to a laptop computer, off they went. And they were able to stay connected with friends and family while traveling, but there was never a dull moment. Their cell phones saved them when their brand new RV's transmission failed on the Bonneville Salt Flats at the start of their first trip. But not to be deterred. Their travels took them to the East Coast, touring from Niagara Falls and pretty much everywhere south all the way into Florida. They even spent 3 weeks in New Orleans for Mardi Gras and discovered there were drive-through daiquiri bars. They'd serve you if you promised to take the drinks home. I can just hear Nancy laughing about that. From '76 on, they discovered an affinity for cruising and took some 15 cruises over the years to Mexico, Western and Eastern Canada, Alaska, Europe, Hawaii, and Japan. And one of their favorite trips was to Japan, where they met members of the Kobe Women's Club, where Nancy had been a member when they lived in Japan. In mid-1998, it was time to start looking around for a small house to rest up from between trips. And while on the road, they discovered Independence. They fell in love with our city and settled here in Independence, and now more of the history that so many of us are part of. Nancy and Mike bought former Independence Mayor Marion Rossi's old house, and that house became a place of music, a yard with beautiful plants, and always friends. Never one to just sit, Nancy over the years became involved in Friends of the Independence Library, the Seroptimus, which is a women's service organization, the Ash Creek Arts Center, Start Making a Reader Today, the SMART program, and oh, she loved music. Having people to her home over the years was full of wonderful food, friends, music, and conversation, and she loved people. After being here a while, John Poff, a former mayor, whom Nancy and Mike knew from the Masonic Lodge, asked Nancy to run for city council. He even took her petition around to get signatures to put her on the ballot because she was, in his words, a good businesswoman with a good head on her shoulders. So many of us knew her through her service as a volunteer on the Independent City Council. From 2001 through 2016, she helped shape the city as we know it today. She sat next to me for 16 years and was our council president from 2011 onward. Nancy was someone you could talk to, and now as mayor, I trusted her counsel, her perspective, and many a time we visited over her dining room table about how best to move things forward. She was a true friend. Always prepared, insightful, and quick with a laugh, she would often communicate by asking thoughtful questions, many times gently sharing an opinion, but you got the idea where she was coming from. When council was having the always difficult discussion on water and sewer rates, Nancy would pipe in with a laugh and say, "I just want to be able to flush the toilet." We all remember the joy in her eyes, the excitement in her voice as we approved the final steps for the downtown development along the river, Independence Landing. She was so proud and knew it would be once in a century type of event that would change our city. And you know what? She was right. Her retirement from city council didn't end her engagement. She loved knowing what was going on. She served as a citizen member of our budget committee, the Independence Library Board, the Hop Festival Commission, all in this addition to her work and love with the Ash Creek Arts Center. Now, she was not one to seek personal recognition, but the community recognized her broad efforts and positive impact with the Chamber of Commerce, naming her as a distinguished citizen. Nancy had a kind word for all. She was always guided by an internal sense of humility, turning words of praise back towards others. A friend commented to her after her passing, "I hope heaven's ready, because she's going to shake things up." She loved that her efforts helped kids read. Today, as we remember Nancy, a line from a Dr. Seuss kids book seems fitting. Don't be sad because it's over. Be happy because it was. Nancy Lodge made all the worlds that she touched better. She lived caring for others, and while we miss her, I hope that we remember and emulate the positive force that Nancy was for all of us. We're going to have several of Nancy's friends come forward and share some thoughts. And I'm going to take the microphone around for anybody who'd like to offer additional thoughts. So I'm going to ask Marilyn Morton to come forward and share her thoughts. Marilyn?
Thank you. Unlike John, I don't have any prepared remarks, so you're going to hear it off the cuff, but I want you to know that I am privileged to have had Nancy Lodge as part of my life. I love to volunteer, and at one point, a number of years ago, I counted up the different things that I volunteered in, on, and around between Independence, Monmouth, and Salem, and I came up with 22 different organizations. Now, I can tell you that at least 15 of them were because of Nancy. Because of Nancy, I joined Smart Reading. And together we suffered through every September. The little kids came to read. We'd read them books, and it took about maybe 8 days, and we both had the flu. Because the little petri dishes love to sit on your lap and cuddle and hear you read to them. She continued that long after I was done, and eventually it was only with kindergartners. And it was about 5 years in when she finally gave up and said, I'm getting a flu shot this year. One of the things that we did very well together was travel. And we have been on the train. We had been on the train several times together. Nancy had never ridden on a real live, going across the country type train trip. So she decided that we needed to do that. And one of the first places we went was we got on the train in Salem and we rode all the way to Vancouver, BC, where we got off, and thankfully there was a hotel only a block and a half away from the train station. Now I have to tell you, we arrived at 9:30 at night, and as soon as we got off the train, she headed for the elevator, and it had a close sign on it, which meant she had to walk up the steps. And that was before the knee replacement, so it was a little bit dicey. And she was complaining about that to someone who was working at the train station, and they said, well, we closed the elevator at 9 o'clock at night. It was 9:12 when we got in. So we walked up the steps, we went to the hotel that we were in. We were on the 3rd floor, lovely place, easy walk, and it happened to be in October. So one day we went downstairs and there was this gorgeous buffet laid out on the ground floor, and we got in line. Surprised nobody else was there, but we got in line and got our plates and started going through the buffet, thinking that at the end of the buffet there'll be a place to pay for this. Well, we got down towards the end of things and we met the manager of the hotel, and he said, this is a family Thanksgiving event. Now, we didn't know Thanksgiving was different in Canada at that time. We certainly did afterwards. And he said, but no, you've got your plates filled already. Go ahead and let's go sit down and eat. You can join our family. Well, that was more than she could even do with any grace. So we took our plates back up the elevator, which was working, and had our lunch upstairs, or our dinner upstairs. We've also traveled to Montana. And Montana was not particularly a destination of choice, but we wanted to be in a sleeper car on the train, and we wanted to go far enough that we could get a full night's sleep, have dinner the night before, and at least breakfast and lunch the next day. So we did that, and I had booked our tickets because she was always the decider of where we were going, and I was always the travel agent that made it happen. And we went as far as a place called Havre, Montana. Now, Havre doesn't have a lot of things to recommend it, other than that it did get us through dinner, breakfast, and lunch, and a nice night's sleep. By the way, which when we got into our sleeper car, now Nancy was 9 years older than me, but we got into the car and she goes, that bunk up there, I'm taking that. So she climbed into the top bunk. Well, we were at a restaurant, and we finally asked, because we had no idea how to pronounce the name of this town. It was Havre, and I thought must be something French. Is it Havre or something like that? And we asked a waitress about it, because Nancy was never shy about asking questions about most anything. And the waitress said, the easy way to remember this is, I don't want her, you can have her. And that was how to pronounce the name of the town. The third train trip we took was we went down to California. It was the first time I'd met her daughter, Sarah. And it was right before I started work at Minette, which was the job from which I retired. And I told them, I'm sorry, I can't come to work on the day you say. It's going to be a week later because I have a vacation planned. And I got to pick the destination this time. She agreed to it because it was in Southern California and she could visit family. We went to the La Brea tar pits together. And I had the best time. And she kept going, well, that's nice. This is very interesting. And the next day we hopped on a bus that's one of those hop-on, hop-off buses that took us into Beverly Hills. And she said, well, this is more like it. So because of Nancy, I have enjoyed community involvement second to none. I have a history of lots and lots of memories with Nancy. I miss her tremendously, but there are still days that I can hear her laugh. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mike, Sarah, Billy, grandchildren, and all of the family that's here, everyone in the room. On behalf of my wife, Nancy, and myself, sympathy for your loss. But also, we want to express our joy for getting to know and becoming great friends with such a wonderful woman. And her husband, too. She wholeheartedly welcomed us both into her life and into these communities. As Mike has repeatedly reminded me, he intends this to be a civic celebration. So let me share just a quick civic story of the Nancy that I knew. As I recall it, it was but within a few hours of my first arrival to these communities that I found Nancy, uninvited, sitting across from me at my desk, telling me, not suggesting, mind you, not asking, mind you, but rather telling me all the things that MyNet would be doing for one of her various entities, such as IDA, all those that she represented. Needless to say, this came as quite a jolt to a cantankerous old businessman, but she did it in such a way that not only made me glad, but anxious to oblige her various needs. Denying a Nancy request quickly became futile. Now you see, I never knew Nancy to sit on the sidelines. Instead, she got squarely into the game of life. She always extended a helping hand, and she never, ever was doing it for self-notoriety, a common theme you've heard here. She was always doing it for others within this community, and I grew to admire her for it. It is often said that a life well lived extends a helping hand to those in need. And today we are celebrating one of the most helpful people we have ever known. Nancy Lodge holds a very special place in my heart. Living, she always made me laugh. And now whenever I think of her, I always smile.
I'm David Klein. I had the honor and the pleasure of knowing Nancy from the time that I moved to Independence in 2010 and became your city manager at that time. Nancy was on the council. She, over the course of my 40 years in 12 cities that I've worked in, I've never had the pleasure of working for somebody as dedicated, as caring as Nancy in her work. Nancy was an amazing boss, an amazing human being. She always had a hug. She always had a warm welcome. She probably kept me from getting fired a few times, no doubt. Yeah, nods ahead. I knew that, John. And I don't know that there was anybody that I've ever served for in council that better understood the role of the city in terms of the community that they serve. She was all about the community. She was all about the library. She was all about the museum, all about the art center, all about the downtown. She gave it all for that. The volunteerism that Marilyn speaks to, that was what she was. Just an amazing human being to have come to know over those years.
Who's next?
Hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca Sexton. I moved to Independence about 7 years ago. I got talked into being on the board at Ash Creek Art Center. Firmly entrenched at Ash Creek Art Center was Nancy Lodge, who was one of the founders. I benefited so greatly from serving with her on the board. She had an amazing sense of humor, which never ran dry. She also helped me and others schlep tables on the Wednesday night, art in the park. She was a yes person. If there was a need, she said yes. This past November, December, we had an opening for just a very small project, which was the president of Ash Creek Art Center, and she stepped up again. I am going to miss her greatly, but I just want to say one of my best memories of her is there were preschool classes, after school classes. We always needed 2 people to be at those classes, a teacher and a volunteer, because of our insurance and just safety issues. She would come. I just have to say, she spent her time so graciously for the children of Independence and Monmouth. She is a mentor to me. I miss her, and she will not be forgotten.
Thank you. Over this side of the room. There you go.
Too many stories. Actually, I preceded Mr. Klein here in the city of Independence, and Nancy came and sat by me after my first year or a little less. And I got 4 things to share. The first one was she would look at me, and finally she said, "You know, you have no anger. You don't have any problems." She said, "But you get mad. The tops of your ears get red. I noticed." So I said, "Okay." The other one was Seroptimist. She invited me to their function, their auction at Willamette Vineyards every year. And I think second, third time, I said, "Nancy, I really appreciate you inviting me." She says, "I don't think I like you. I know you can afford stuff." Maybe. And the other one was, one of the other ones was she invited me to be the reader today, make a reader today, and that was a lot of fun, going and reading Dr. Seuss. The other one was Nancy and Marilyn were involved in this. We were at the City Day in the state capitol, and they invite cities and people that work for the cities to come in. And we're sitting on a little stem wall, and Nancy, like everybody said, is a hugger. Well, she also is kind of a touchy-feely. And I think we'd been on a class on sexual harassment. And we're sitting on this stem wall, and Nancy is talking, and to make a point, she reaches down and kind of touches my knee, and I screamed. I said, "Nancy," and she said, "What's the matter?" I said, "You touched me." And anyway, her and Marilyn about fell off that stone wall. I remember that to this day.
Thanks, Greg. Others?
Hi. I met Nancy soon after she and Mike arrived in Independence. John Poff stopped by the library and said, "So you still go down to Albany to play in the band there, right?" And so he introduced me to Nancy, and we started to carpool down to Lynn Benton Concert Band once a week. And we shared stories. My focus at that point in time was getting a new library built. And so, of course, those were the stories that I shared. And she got involved. She became one of the driving forces, along with Marilyn and a few others, in making sure that the library got built. They fundraised. They went to every organization and group. When Nancy got involved, she gave it her all. There was no holding back. And I consider her a wonderful friend, a great mentor, and she's going to be sorely missed.
Others?
Hi, my name's Natasha Adams. I met Nancy, like many of us, volunteering. She roped me into IDA, which is now one of the things that is most near and dear to my heart. But what I loved about Nancy, other than her laugh and her great sense of humor, was her enormous heart. And she always asked about my daughter and how she was doing, but genuinely always cared and was so excited when science became such a big part of Abigail's life. And I'll say I actually got to know Nancy more in the last few months of her life, and I'm grateful for that time. And one of the stories that I heard about Nancy that I have to share is we know her love for music, but she chose to have a grand piano in her house that was electric because it had an applause button. And that is a story that I hold that just really encapsulates Nancy. So we will miss her a lot.
Anybody else? It's the shyest this group has ever been. Oh, I think I see a lady.
Well, like so many people, I'm Patty, and married to Mr. McCardle, and for 32 years. And I kind of giggled to myself to think that Nancy sat next to him for half the time we were married, which is quite a tribute. And I was thinking I should just thank everybody, anyway, I should thank her publicly for that. But what I was thinking when John was putting together his remarks and talking, I just find it so impressive that all their professional life together and seeing all the slides, and then to know that they went on all their adventures and they came back to Independence. And when I met them coming back, I kind of thought that they'd been here forever. And I thought to myself, and then they got so involved, and they were involved in everything like that. And I thought, what an inspiration! This is like, their roots were deep here in some of their life because they felt like they were always here. And this wasn't a retirement, it was like a whole nother life. So I find that really inspiring and kind of something that I'd like to admire and live on just like they did. And I really like the fact that even if Nancy, and she was involved with all these things, and many of us were on so many things with her, is that even if she wasn't there, she always would drop a note that would show up on your desk at the right time, knowing that she was watching out for you and what you're doing. And so anyway, I will continue to admire her and Mike and thank the whole family for that.
Thank you. Last call, please. Sure, this is your opportunity.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the beautiful eulogy. That was really wonderful to hear. And my name is Sally. My maiden name is Rice. My mother was a Streshly, so my mother was Nancy's big sister. We in the family did not call her Nancy, though. Have you figured that out, some of you, from the slides? So her middle name is Canice. My mother got to choose that middle name because I think she was 15 or 16 when Nancy was born. And so she was nicknamed Candy for the entire time I knew her growing up. And I was born when she was about 12 or 13. So she was my first babysitter. And some of the stories she would tell about what she did as my babysitter were not all that great. And in the last couple of years, luckily, I got her to Zoom with me every other week. We called it Fortnight Fridays at 4. So every other Friday, we would get together at 4 o'clock and we'd have a Zoom. And we would just talk and talk and talk. And poor Mike was in the background probably going, when's my dinner going to be ready? But it was so much fun, and I'm so grateful that I got that time because I only came up here once in 1999, and then I didn't get to come again. But I would see her when she came down, and we'd talk on the phone and things like that. But she did tell me that she thinks she dropped me on my head when I was an infant, and she felt a little bit guilty, but not too guilty. And if you can just imagine the stories that you're all telling, all of us in the family, we have like exponentially more of those stories because we would get together pretty much every month celebrating all the birthdays. For that period of time, the extended family was really all in the San Diego area for many years, and it was just a pleasure. And I got to go to her offices in La Jolla and just, well, of course, the musical part, too. I played the flute. She played the flute. We took her father to the San Diego Symphony, even when he was in his 90s. And so, she just had an amazing impact on me. And obviously, breaks your heart. Like, oh, come on, I still needed a few more years of talking to you, but I'm glad that she's, not suffering anymore, and obviously she had an amazing community here with all of you, so I thank you very much. Any other family members?
My dad is Aunt Candy's big brother, and I was actually Billy's babysitter. And I'm a public school educator, so don't tell anybody that I probably locked him in his room and probably wasn't the best babysitter, but I became an okay teacher. She could tease without hurting people's feelings. Like, she teased my dad to no end. She teased my mom, and my mom didn't even have a sense of humor that much. She always knew how to be good-natured in that. That's an art, because when you try it out and then you hurt people's feelings, she was always perfect with that. She was the sharpest tool in the shed. I would tease my dad and say that she was smarter. The music in the family, from the opera to the classical music, to be so refined and educated, but also be so down to earth and so humble and self-effacing. The humor, usually the teasing, she would self-deprecate herself usually. She'd drag somebody else in there as well. But I think when I think of her, there's always like no time had passed. And so we all get busy. You guys go off to college, or we have families. But there, as soon as you saw her 5 feet away, it always felt like we were such a close family. And so she allowed us to stay close, whether we were as close. And she built a family here. And it was so great to see and hear how much she impacted this town. And that's really important for all of us to hear. And my mom couldn't be here today, and just not able to speak at my own father's memorial in the last couple of years. I wanted to be able to speak for Aunt Candy, because she meant the world to us as well. So thank you for everybody. Thank you for being here.
Others?
Thank you for your wonderful speech, all of you. Yeah, I wasn't the best baby either. So, where are you? There. Oh, my mother, wonderful. I got so many stories. Such a wonderful person. She was always, no matter what, always the best. To have the best to say about everything. She never had she always looked at the best, the brighter, the best part of whatever it is, and bring that out, and I'd grab onto that, and everyone would. She had such a way of with people, and I'm so proud to have her as a mother and you as a father. And thank you. I forgot about everything else I was going to say. Thank you all so much. This is so great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else jumping up. I want to thank all the people who shared stories today, shared feelings. I know there are lots of them out there, and I'm sure that we will afterwards talk amongst ourselves and remember the wonderful things that Nancy was involved in, the wonderful things that she did for our community, for her family, for her friends. She touched all of us. And I would tell you that she would be so touched that so many of you came today, in the middle of a day, to remember her and to tell the stories and how she touched all of us. And today's event and the things that were said are being recorded, so they will be able to be shared with those who were unable to be with us today. So I want to thank everybody for coming. You're welcome to hang out for a while and visit with family members and friends. There's a display table over this side with some family pictures and mementos of the past. So thank you again for being here. Good afternoon.